Hey, are you a business owner, entrepreneur, or professional? If so, we want you to apply to be a featured guest on our show. My name is Adam Torres, and I host the Mission Matters series of podcasts. I've recorded over 3,000 episodes, and we are just getting started. How do you know if you'd be a good guest to be on the show? Well, only one way to find out, and that's to apply, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We want guests that have a story to tell, guests with a brand, a product, or a service that can benefit my audience of listeners. If this sounds like you, go to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. I'd love to talk to you and get to know more about your story. Again, head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, now let's get into the show. Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Dan Einzig on the line, and he's a founder over at Mystery Design. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam. Thank you for having me. Great to meet you.
All right, Dan. So I'm excited to get into today's topic. I mean, we will cover mystery design and your business and how you grew that. We'll talk about the legalized cannabis industry. We'll talk about hospitality, co-venturing model that you've managed to use to create millions of dollars of value, working with startups and co-venturing in these partnerships, which not everybody watching has ever heard of this. So, I mean, we got a lot to cover today. And I think maybe just to get us started, we just go back in time a bit. So how did you really get started on this entrepreneurial venture?
Wow. Well, I guess I started out as a musician, actually, playing guitar in a band, and I loved music. And, the truth was that I was not very good. So what I was able to do, though, was pivot into designing for music. And that I really love art and design at school, and grew up knowing that actually what I'd love to do, if I couldn't be a musician, would be to work with musicians, collaborate with them, and create the art for their in those days, CD covers. And, I was just so fortunate that whilst I was at St. Martin's doing my degree, I got a placement or an internship, as they call it, at an amazing music management company who managed Elton John and a couple of other massive artists back in the day. And those guys, they took me on when I graduated, and I was just so lucky because it was an absolute dream job. And I got to collaborate with kind of the heroes, my guitar heroes that I had growing up. People like Eric Clapton.
Wow.
And Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits. I worked with Elton and had an amazing several years, about 6 or 7 years in the music business, kind of at the tail end, really, of kind of the heyday of the music business, or certainly the heyday from a design perspective. Previously there'd been kind of album covers, big format, canvases for your creativity that had reduced down to CD covers. Mm-hmm. But what started to happen, towards the tail end of the 90s was that downloads were starting to happen, and the music business was in total disarray. But in the meantime, we had a lot of fun, working in that sector and meeting all these heroes and working on designing CD packaging, tour merchandise, and then also got into creating these limited edition art books with an amazing publisher called Genesis Publications. I did these signed limited number copies, and they were really art books. And so that was when I really got to collaborate with these artists, and worked with Bob Gruen, a great photographer who did a lot of work with John Lennon, and worked with the Apple Corps, who were still the managers of the Beatles, although they hadn't been around for a long time, but still massively popular, obviously. And then also with the Rolling Stones as well. So I guess it wasn't really, in those days, I wasn't really being entrepreneurial as such. I was just having an amazing time and living living a blessed life working with these heroes of mine.
Yeah, that's something. I mean, like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, when I graduated college, I was studying for like financial exams and being a financial advisor. And I'm like, oh, you get to work with Elton John, the Rolling Stones, all these other people. And you get to create this limited and work with the companies that are creating this limited edition artwork that people will treasure forever and that they'll collect. And that this is like centerpieces of their collection is what you're working on. Like, what was that like being in at such a young age and such an interesting environment?
It was a lot of fun. I've got to say, it was very creative, and but I also learned a lot about, I learned a lot about branding actually, because my interest really was in helping bands become brands, and bands were becoming brands at that time. It just really interested me.
What year was that roundabout? Just roundabout.
Sorry?
What years was this at? Just roundabout, because that's pretty advanced, the concept of creating the brand around it. Before it was just the music.
Yeah. So this was in the mid 90s.
Wow. Yeah,
and,
that's
so it really interested me. And when, I guess the entrepreneurial element started when the company I was working for. So originally I was working for this big music management company, and I was in the art department. And the art department, about a year after I joined, we carved off and became a separate business. And we still did all the work for Elton, and we still did all the work for the bands that were represented by that manager. But we also were then able to work for all the other artists as well. And that small company, originally I had planned to join forces with them and become a partner in that business. It didn't work out in the end. And so plan B was for me to develop my own agency. And so in the late 90s, 98, I founded Mystery Design. And that was when I really got into the idea of kind of building brands for bands. But prior to that, what was it like designing, art books? I mean, I got to work with a famous pop artist, Peter Blake, who's famous for the artwork he did for the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's album cover, which is a kind of iconic album cover.
Yes.
He did a whole ton of sketches, just hand-drawn sketches, a whole sketchbook full of Eric Clapton when he was playing live at the Royal Albert Hall. And he basically asked us whether we could take that kind of sketchbook and create something, something visually exciting around it. And so collaborating with him on that to produce this limited edition book of kind of edgy, manipulated graphics alongside his sketches, and taking his sketches and manipulating them.
Wow.
It was unbelievable, really. Like I had to pinch myself sometimes that I was working with these guys.
That's amazing. So let's get into Mystery. So Mystery Design. So now you're obviously transitioning through your career, and now you're going to launch the business. So before we talk about the agency itself, there's that little moment in time that you make a decision when you're either going to work for somebody or you're going to go out on your own. So there's some people watching this right now that are thinking, maybe they're going to start their own business, or maybe they're in a position to do so, or they've been wanting to do it for a while, but they haven't taken that step. Now, obviously, now you have the benefit of hindsight, right? So no business is just like, you start it and it all works out. Like there's ups, downs, sideways, pivots. I mean, a lot of stuff for any pain, happiness. I mean, a lot of business owners watching so they can relate. But for those newbies that are just considering it, like what kind of things would you tell them, or kind of advice would you say they should have in mind before going out there and launching a business?
Wow. I mean, that's a massive question.
That is.
I've worked with a lot of startups, and the one thing that I think is consistent with all of them is that the business plan is never, the reality is never never the same as the business plan. So but having said that, I think it's really vital to have a business plan. And by that, I mean, really think about and define and write, not just have it in your head, but actually produce something that says, what the key goal of the business is, and what the who it's for and how it's going to work. And then of course you've got to financially model it out as well. And there are tons of resources online now these days to help you with that. And obviously people and consultants that can help you with that as well. But I would just say that taking the time to plan what the business is all about and who it's for and how it's going to be different and how it's going to be funded, because obviously a lot of businesses cost money especially in the early days to keep going. And I think that's one of the things I've seen time and time again talking with young entrepreneurs is that their expectations of when they start making money typically are perhaps over optimistic in terms of the timing. Like I would, however long you think it's going to take you to make money, I would say double it.
I was going to say double it
as a rule of thumb. So make sure you've got enough money in the bank to keep going. And I think that's probably rule number one. But yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, I've been very, very lucky because I've been able to do what I love and make a living, and that to me is worth a fortune. That is worth millions. I know a lot of people that have had amazing careers, and have earned a lot of money. Working for big corporates, blue chips. Yeah. But when I talk to them about it, they tend to be, they don't love it. They in fact often they hate it or they feel trapped. And so I think what I tell my kids, because I'm hoping that they will become entrepreneurs one day, is I say, find something you love and then figure out how you can make money at it. Because my parents brought me up to say, just find your passion and follow your passion. Wow. And that is great. But a lot of people can follow their passion and then 30 years down the line realize they've had a fun time, but they've got nothing to show for it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important in this day and age to not be bashful about thinking, how is my passion? How can I combine passion with making money? And I think I've been very, very fortunate to be able to do that.
That's awesome. So let's go further into mystery, and thank you for that advice, by the way, because it's I love the idea. So double it. Whatever you think it's going to take, double it in terms of amount of time, so that you have that cash flow. That's your oxygen. You need it to breathe. So all great, solid advice there, Dan. Let's get into mystery design. So first, just tell us a little bit more about the agency and the type of things that you do.
Sure. So we're a strategic brand design agency. And we specialize in two categories. We specialize in the hospitality sector, food and beverage, typically creating restaurant concepts, scalable restaurant concepts, but also food and beverage brands. Mm-hmm. And we also, in the last few years, have pivoted into the legalized cannabis sector as well, and work with one company in particular who I've become very intertwined with, and prior to that, a few other cannabis companies who are who are really exploring and trying to professionalize the industry, and that's something that's really exciting. In an industry that's been obviously it's been on a black market for many years, and then legalized for medical use. And then now legalized for recreational use in California, where I am, and many other states as well. But so when I say strategic brand design agency, what that means is we use a very clearly defined strategic methodology to define brand vision for a business or a brand. And you can kind of almost interchange that word brand and business, because I believe that brand is really at the very heart of what business is about. Yeah. Brand runs through every element of the business. And so, what we try and do is help to really define a very, very clear brand vision that helps decision-making across the whole organization. Because once you have a clear vision at the center, that informs from my side, the design strategy. So how you're going to, whether it's website or packaging or interior brand design. So that informs that, but it also informs your whole commercial strategy. What is your product? What is your pricing strategy? What is your value proposition? the brand vision can also, or should also inform your people and culture. Your recruitment policy, your training, the culture of the business. It can inform the operations. What your customer journey is. And I think it should also inform the kind of product market fit. Like your R&D, your consumer research, and of course your marketing. So if you have a really clear brand vision, everyone in the business across the organization can pull in the same direction. I think that's a really powerful asset. And we have a very clearly defined methodology to help define that vision with our clients.
So I know that your methodology is defined and clear, and I know that the answer to this next question, it's going to vary. It's going to vary on the co-founder. It's going to vary on the experience, the brand, how far along they are. But just in general, when you bring on new clients and you're having this discussion with them about brand vision and what that looks like, I'm sure that maybe some of the same opportunity areas come up time and time again. What are some of those common themes of opportunity areas that you see that many times brands may be lacking in terms of building out their brand vision prior to working with you and Mystery?
Well, I think the opportunity for all brands and businesses is really is really to define your brand personality. Like I believe people connect with people. Okay. And so if you create a brand that behaves like a person, has a personality like a person, then people are more likely to connect with it on an emotive level. Why is emotion important? Because it's quite simply, people make the vast majority of their purchase decisions emotively. You think rationally, but you behave emotively. And so you want, the most powerful brands in the world and businesses in the world, they have not just customers, they have advocates, they have fans, they have people that love their brand and do the selling for them. So, if you can create a person or a personality that people either respect or, aspire to, or simply just relate to, that becomes a hugely valuable asset. So I think that's the key that can happen across all businesses, I think, especially consumer-facing businesses. But it works just as well for B2B as well, I think. But yeah, and I think the other thing is for today, in today's world, you can't hide anything anymore. Like branding used to be a bit of a dirty word in a sense, because people used to think of it as something that kind of glossed over or hid the truth. But now the truth is out there all the time. Branding is not about that anymore. Branding is about, expressing the truth behind a brand, behind a business. And it means that businesses have to behave, respectfully and equitably and everything else. So, and I think that the final part is that, for me, really successful brands are customer centric. Okay, so putting the customer really at the center of their business, and so understanding customer is key as well. So, and part of our methodology is really to define that brand vision, is to understand the customer, but don't just understand them from a kind of socio-demographic categories. Whether they're A's, AB1s. What their income is. I mean, that's important too. But understanding what their emotive triggers are, what they have, what's common about them. Because what we find now with especially mainstream or mass market brands is that they have to appeal to a really wide audience, and they have to appeal to a number of different types of people. So what we do is, rather than think about them as how much they earn or where they live or what they vote, we think about them as what are their commonalities in their sort of psychographic profiles. So understanding the customer, understanding the market, the landscape, where the opportunity is. I mean, this is kind of business planning in some respect, but it's business planning with a brand vision as the output. Yeah. And so having a really clear understanding of your customer, really defining who it is you want to connect with, and creating a brand that's both honest to you and your business, but also that is going to connect and that your customer group are going to relate to. Understanding that, I think, is really key. So
man, that's awesome. It's awesome. As you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking about like brand vision. I'm like thinking about like mission matters, and I'm thinking about even our brand and like what we're building, and the platform to elevate the voices of others, and some of the things like amplifying stories and all these things. And I'm so inspired. I'm like, I can't take notes right now because we're doing the interview, but I'm like, where's my notebook? I got to get some of this stuff. I'm gonna watch this one over again myself.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can share with you what our methodology is as well, because it is pretty simple. But what it does is, you're right, it is about storytelling, but it's about defining. It's not just storytelling per se. It's breaking down that story into the key messages that help you express what your business is all about. And one of the things I learned over the years is that a lot of businesses define what their key message is. They think, okay, this is what we're about. And they just shout it. They shout it out. They put it on social. They put it on their website. They put it on their advertising. They put it on their packaging. And going back to the idea that people connect with people, imagine if you met somebody that just had one message and kept shouting it. They'd be incredibly dull, right?
Yes.
So what we try and do is we try and establish a kind of hierarchy of messages, and then we figure out where they should be positioned on the customer journey. So when somebody's never heard of your brand or your business before, what's the one thing you really want them to know about it? And then once they have heard of you, what's the next message you want them to know? How can they scratch below the surface? And so on and so forth, right the way through to sale. And then after sale, what do you want? How can we create an experience that means that what do we want them to say to recommend you, to advocate your brand to somebody else? And so quite often what we'll do is we'll take that message and work our way backwards. So if you know that you want people to say this about you, then you've got to deliver that all the way through the organization. So and then thinking about shouting, what we often do is we put in what I call brand whispers. A brand whisper is something that you say quietly, because not everybody, and you have to accept that this message not everybody will hear. But the lovely thing about it is the people that do hear, they lean in and they want to know more. And when they do hear it, they feel smart for having noticed it. And so the first thing they do is tell somebody else. So a brand whisper, defining on your message, key message hierarchy, which messages you want to shout about, which messages you want to whisper, and where on the customer journey they are is really critical. And that again is part of that clear brand vision that's at the center of the organization.
That's awesome. So Dan, I want to switch it up a bit. I want to go into this co-venturing model that you've been participating in, and maybe how you've been working with some companies during this time. And I mean, I know you work with a number of niches from cannabis to hospitality. So we can really tackle any sector or all of them. But tell us a little bit more about the model and really kind of how you stumbled upon it.
Yeah, sure. So I always first of all, I always wanted my own business. So I think that, that's the one thing, back to your earlier question about, what could you tell young potential entrepreneurs? I think it's either something that you are kind of born to do, or maybe something that for me it was. Anyways, for me, it's something I always knew I wanted my own business. I also, so I I get very excited meeting other young entrepreneurs and business startups as well. I love meeting entrepreneurs because they have so much energy and they're full of, they're obsessed typically with their idea.
Yeah.
Right? And I get to meet them a lot because they come to me at a time when it is still just an idea or a business plan. And they want me to help bring it to life. And whether that's just through the brand design or the interior design, if it's a restaurant concept, or if it's through whichever element it is, it's a very exciting process. And that strategic methodology I was just talking you through is also it's a great experience for them and me to get to know each other very, very well.
Yeah.
And so I think I'd been working, as the agency had been working as any other regular creative agency would, as fee-paying clients. Mm-hmm. But I noticed, that a couple of our clients in particular, were absolutely hitting it out of the park. And, without blowing my own trumpet, I think the brand and the design and, what we'd helped them create strategically was a big part of that and had added a lot of value to that business. And it started me thinking, it's great to get a fee, but actually when things go really well, mm-hmm. the idea of having a share of equity in that business is really appealing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you've got to remember there are plenty of other businesses where you could have a share of equity that don't knock it out of the park. And so having a very varied portfolio is key. But I think so. What I started to think about was, well, when the opportunity comes along, when you're meeting with startup entrepreneurs, that's really the moment at which they are either have fundraised or are in the process of fundraising or about to, and that's the point. The timing is right for a conversation about some sort of co-venturing or investment or equity, sweat equity swap, if you like. Mm-hmm. And so I started having those conversations with potential clients. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because for them, they told me that they weren't having that conversation with my competitors, because typically people will often go and see through, 2 or 3 different agencies before choosing. Mm-hmm. And so they were interested in that. And the reason they're interested is because they recognize that once you have skin in the game, so to speak, your level of commitment and dedication to that project is going to be significantly more involved. And the truth is that they're absolutely right, because when that happens, you cannot help but be motivated to do more, to do as much as you possibly can. And I think it's fair to say that for all of our clients, we we bend over backwards. But I think there's no question that when you have even a very small percentage of the business, mm-hmm. that there is it's on your mind, morning, noon, and night. You're thinking about it all the time because you're part of it. And so I remember meeting this incredible guy. A potential client came to see me about 10 years ago, actually, just at the time where I'd been thinking, what would be great would be to get to build a portfolio of these conventions. And I told him that was my plan, and as part of the introduction to mystery design, what we're planning to do is develop this range, this portfolio of co-ventures. And mm-hmm. he was interested in that to the point where he said, you know what, I would love to work with you on that basis, because for the reasons I just said, about the commitment, the level of commitment he was going to get. But also, so that was primary reason number one. Mm-hmm. But obviously there's a cost saving element to it as well. So for a lot of clients, it's simply, well, if I don't have to pay, I can just pay with equity. At that mm-hmm. moment in time, the equity isn't worth anything really. Like it's worth the share value is $1 a share or a penny a share. At that moment, it's what it could be worth is what's exciting. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that they're able to save money at that point in the process, and quite often I'll meet people pre-funding, mm-hmm. so they're literally funding it themselves at that point. So to save money and give a share of equity is quite appealing. But also that level of, as I said, that level of involvement, and also the way that I'm then able to or encouraged to open up my network mm-hmm. to those partners.
I think so. If we think about it, for me as a theme overall, a lot of top talented agencies, people, creative directors, when you think about like the IP side of things and what you create and what you put out there and the value you add, to me, this just seems like an amazing model overall, to be able to partner with clients, to be able to be on the same side of the table, so to speak, and to have that skin in the game, as you mentioned. I think that gives an opportunity to really take the relationship and businesses to the next level. Really, I mean, that's just the way it works, in my opinion. So if there's going to be obviously some other agency owners and creative directors and things like that out there watching this, like what kind of lessons have you learned from going down this path? Because as we mentioned earlier, like nothing's always smooth. Like what kind of takeaways have you gotten from this so far?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think we're always learning, and I'm trying to think of the key lessons. I think there are several. The first thing is, I think that you have to spread your bets. To be completely honest, not everything is going to work, and there are, what I've learned is there are literally 100 different reasons why a business might not work, and it's very often nothing to do with
10,000
exactly, and it's very often things that are completely out of your control. And so even if you really think the business plan is amazing, I wouldn't suggest putting all of your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
So having a kind of variety is great. And I've been involved with several that haven't made it, for one reason or another. And not everything does work. But I think one of the key lessons is, from having maybe backed the wrong horse a few times, and having backed a couple that are really great. I think, really believing in the founder. The founder is really, really key. And you've got to believe in the founder as someone who has already got the right experience. And if they don't have the right experience, why do you believe that they can do what it is that they're going to say? Like, there must be something about them, right? Do they have? Do they understand, how to add shareholder value, as they grow the business? Do they even really know about business growth? Have they got that experience? Do they see the big picture, and can they focus on small details? That, I think, is a really rare skill set. You get some people that are good at one or the other, but if you can find people that are good at both, I think that's really, really valuable. Will they leave with vision? Will they stay up all night? Are they a survivor? All of these, these are, if the answer is yes to all of those, then you might have found someone special to co-venture with. And I think that's a big lesson. The business plan, I think, is way less important. When you've answered yes to all of that, the business plan can pivot and change.
Yeah.
But the founder, you can't, right? Obviously you need to be able to trust them as well, because there's you have to be able to trust each other. I think that's really key. But other lessons, I think, I've found that, everything is negotiable. Quite often people will say that's not negotiable. And that's that sort of stop reply. And then, you can actually, what I found is when people say it's not negotiable, that's just not negotiable right at that moment in the conversation. Yeah. But perhaps the next day or the next time you talk about it, it is negotiable again. So I wouldn't give up when someone says that to you. I think the other thing to remember is that realizing the equity value from your co-ventures or from your co-ventures can take years, right?
Yeah.
So every business owner and entrepreneur I meet will always say they've got this 3-year exit strategy. And I don't know any businesses that have exited in 3 years yet. Maybe that's different in the tech world. I think that happens quite a lot. I'm not so much in the tech world, but I would just be aware that these are long-term plays. Okay? Yeah. See that value realized. I would say that it's important to make sure that you don't. For me, it's been important not to just to work for free. The equity is one element, but I think you need to be paid as well, at least to cover your expenses and the expenses you have of your business.
Yeah.
I'm often asked whether I would invest my own money into these co-ventures, as well as the kind of strategic advice and creative executions. and I have done that in the past, and I try not to do that now moving forward. I think it's just as a rule of thumb, what you need to understand is that what I'm delivering, or what you would be delivering, is better than money, and it is an investment. So you think of it as, oh, it's not costing me anything, it's just my time. Well, actually, your time is very valuable. And so what you need to go into any one of these relationships thinking that you are investing in their business, and therefore you need to ask yourself, if this was my money, would I invest in this business? Yeah. If you're not sure, then I wouldn't invest your time either, because you could use that time so much better with developing value somewhere else. And then I think one of the other things is there's a sort of, on the positive side, there's an unseen benefit to these co-ventures, which is, even if they don't work, what you're able to do is you're able to relate to other new clients or potential clients much more on a peer-to-peer level. You'll be able to, you can have a conversation as a brand owner, as a part owner in a brand, and it changes the conversation entirely from service provider client to peer-to-peer, and the confidence that it generates within that potential client is so valuable. So I think that even the businesses that I've co-ventured in that haven't worked have added value to my creative agency on the basis of being able to land bigger contracts and clients, through that confidence.
No, I get it. And the relationships you build long-term. So many entrepreneurs, I mean, this is, I probably launched 20 businesses before this one, which actually does work. Mission matters. So, I mean, entrepreneur that's out there that's going to continue to be an entrepreneur, they don't forget things like that, and they want to do repeat business. And when you build those relationships, those things are lifelong. You don't know where that person's going to be in the future, especially if you were making your decision to work with them based off of a lot of the founder-based attributes and qualities that you mentioned. Like, just because a business doesn't work doesn't mean that that founder is not going to be good at their next venture or the one after that. So I love the insight, Dan. I want to get some insight into so you have two pretty specific niches that you work in. So hospitality and cannabis. So like, what attracts you to these spaces right now? Like, what are you seeing? Because I feel like you have a unique vantage point being so entrenched in these markets, so to speak.
Another great question, Adam. Yeah. So I mean, it's quite personal with me. I've always enjoyed following my passions, so art and design is obviously key. That led into music as well. And then, I love food and drink and socializing and eating out and hotels and all of that. So there's a natural progression with following something that you're very passionate about already. You're part of that world anyway. So why not really kind of develop your business around it? Yeah. And it's the same with cannabis. I think what I realized is that all of these elements, whether it's music, whether it's food and drink, or whether it's cannabis, these things are highly emotive, and they change you, they affect you, and you have a full experience. It's not just if you're creating a product that isn't necessarily consumed, but it's just used. Yeah, that's great. But what I'm excited about brand experience. And with restaurant concepts or hotel concepts, you can literally create an environment, and people are consuming the food that you created in an environment that you created, listening to music you created, smelling the smells you created. You basically create the whole three-dimensional, multi-sensory experience. And music is like a multi-sensory experience, and so is cannabis. And so I think that's what draws me to those categories, is that real sense of being able to help people experience something in a new way.
Oh, that's great. And as you're explaining this, I'm thinking about some of the restaurants that I recently went to over here. Now that everything's opening back up in LA, and I'm like, oh, I miss those experiences. I think I took a lot of those experiences for granted, and how much. I mean, I don't have any architectural or design background. I just am fortunate to maybe go to some good restaurants where somebody else has thought of all of these things ahead of time for me, and I just walk in as a patron, and I'm like, oh, I like this place. I don't know. I know the food's good, and I don't know why, but I keep coming back over and over and over again. Why? Because these experiences were created for me. So I see a lot of the similarities in what you're doing and kind of the way you describe your process and how you're creating these concepts and really these immersive environments, as you said, for the patrons or clients or whatever we want to say on that end. No, that makes a lot of sense, Dan. And so I want to ask you. So, I mean, obviously working with all of these in the cannabis space as deeply as you are, I mean, what do you see the future of cannabis looking like?
Well, I think it's a very exciting time in cannabis right now. I'm involved with three brands at the moment. One of them we just launched it's called The Root of It All, and it's in the wellness category. And I think that's really where the future of cannabis lies in terms of becoming national or global in terms of accessibility. So the root of it all, we've just launched an e-commerce website where you can buy these incredible tinctures and topicals. So these are ointments or tinctures that you drop under your tongue that are Ayurvedic recipes. So they're thousands of years old Ayurvedic recipes, which have specific therapeutic benefits. So, for example, if you can't sleep, there's one that helps you sleep, really gives you a restful sleep. If you're actually the opposite and you just can't, you find you need a bit of a pep, then there's a product there that just gives you that all natural energy, that sort of focused energy. And what's so great about these is that we've taken these ancient remedies and we've amplified them with pure CBD. Wow. And it's really fascinating because they not only do they work really well, they're completely all natural, and they I think they represent the future of where cannabis is going for the mainstream. I think there'll always be a really strong kind of contingent for the recreational hardcore cannabis products, and there'll be and there's some fun brands that we're working on. Tough Mama is one of them, and Mystify, which is a beautiful high-end luxury product. And I think again that is another area that I think is expanding. You see expanding across the industry, where moving from kind of everyday commodity type products to elevated experience, pure, natural, and premium luxury experience within the cannabis sector.
Yeah, I see a lot of opportunity in that, like you said, so to enhance some things that are already there, to create some other things, and ultimately to, as you mentioned earlier in the interview, to create new experiences. So that being said, Dan, I have to say it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. I mean, I learned a lot. I like I said, I'm going to watch this one again because I want to go through your roadmap again and have some more thought on what the conversation was about today. But that if somebody's watching this, and so final question, 2-part question. So if somebody's watching this and they want to learn more about mystery or mystery design, and they want to follow up, number one, what's typically the right type of client that's a good fit to work with you and your team? And number two, what's the best way for them to follow up and to connect?
Okay, well, number one, we are open to working with startup entrepreneurs through to established multinational corporations. We have a lot of experience with all. Our typical sweet spot is a mid-size company where they have, if it's a restaurant group, for example, they've grown to 5 to 10 restaurants, and they're looking to take that next step and really expand and scale up that business. Yeah. And that's typically a very good inflection point for a business to look at where they are and where they want to go. how to get in touch with me, it's quite simple. I'm if you go to my website, mystery-design.com, and you'll find a link to my email there, dan@mystery-design.com, or follow me on Instagram, just at Einzig, which is EINZIG. Or LinkedIn. Obviously, I'm there on LinkedIn, Dan Einzig. Mystery Design should be fairly straightforward to find.
Fantastic. Well, Dan, again, thank you for coming on the show today. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you learned a lot. I sure did. If you did, don't forget, hit that subscribe button. We definitely want you to be a return listener or return viewer, depending on where you're watching this. And Dan, thanks again. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Adam. Really appreciate it.